Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night, and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Dr. Renee, Emma Webb, Adam Cherry and Benjamin Butterworth. Tonight on the show.
Are Labour giving in to their union paymasters already just 6 weeks in?
There is no toxic trans debate.
Divisive identity politics in policing is tearing this country apart.
When is the Church of England not the Church of England?
And beep beep, it's the end of the self-checkouts.
Emma Webb talking about Justin Welby. I can feel my blood pressure already. It's 6 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. A very warm welcome, my friends, to the Saturday 5 with me, Darren Grimes. Now, A-level results came out this week, and I'm thrilled to have Benjamin Butterworth on the panel. He is, of course, living proof that no matter what you did in school, being gender neutral, woke enough to never need sleep, and a Labour Party activist can still get you on the telly. And then we've got the brain boxes, Dr. Renee and Emma Webb, who sadly dash any hope for us mere mortals, but prove you can be smart, stunning, and still packed with common sense.
No.
And finally, Adam Cherry. Adam did a stint working in Westminster after Bristol University and somehow escaped unscathed and not ending up wetter than an otter's pocket, surprisingly. He's not somewhere to the left of Chairman Mao and desperate to join the next special advisor or be a think tanker or future MP, unlike someone else on this panel. Now, welcome to the world of bananas, Adam Cherry. Now, folks, you know the drill. Each host outlines their argument about a chosen topic, and then we all pile in, and the fur starts to fly. And, of course, we want your views, much more important than any of ours. Send them and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Don't forget your questions for Ask the 5, no topic, off limits. But, folks, before we start tearing each other apart, it's your Saturday night news with Sophia Wensler.
Darren, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 6 o'clock. Priceless artworks, including a Van Gogh painting, have not been damaged and all the public are safe. That's after a fire ripped through the roof of the historic Somerset House. London Fire Brigade said 125 firefighters and 20 fire engines were helping to tackle the blaze in central London. Smoke was spotted billowing from the roof of the historic building on the Strand just before midday. The venue is now closed and all the events have been cancelled today. The cause of the fire is still unknown. In Scotland, a member of the SNP has been kicked out of the party for comments about the Israel-Hamas war, described as utterly abhorrent. John Mason's been accused of flippantly dismissing the deaths of more than 40,000 Palestinians. Party officials will now meet to discuss a fixed-term period for suspension. Greater Manchester Police have launched a murder investigation after a man who became trapped in a burning building died in hospital. Officers were called to a fire on Dumbarton Green in Wigan early on Wednesday morning. It's being treated as a suspected arson attack. Police across the country are now on high alert today as protests and counter-protests take place nationwide. It follows the arrest of 460 people so far, linked to violent disorder earlier this month, with hundreds now facing court. Tensions are expected in Birmingham, with the group Stand Up to Racism also taking to the streets. Meanwhile, our reporter Ray Addison has been speaking to protesters in Dover. And we'll bring you that in the next bulletin. Now, in Ireland, a teenage boy has appeared in court charged over a stabbing outside Renmore Barracks. Army chaplain Father Paul Murphy posted on social media to say he was doing OK after receiving treatment for serious but non-life-threatening injuries. The 16-year-old during a dance class at the end of last month. The killing sparked anti-immigration and counter-protests across the UK, in part because of misinformation about the suspect. The government is being warned it will have to increase funding to meet its pledge to end the so-called 8 a.m. scramble for GP appointments. The Doctors Association claims at least £35 more per patient per year is needed to match funding levels from a decade ago. During the election campaign, Labour said it would make it easier to book appointments. In Gaza, it's reported at least 18 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike. Hours earlier, President Joe Biden had claimed he was optimistic a ceasefire deal with Hamas was closer than it's ever been. Following negotiations with mediators in Qatar, Joe Biden told reporters there are just a couple of issues standing in the way of an agreement, which could lead to hostages being freed.
I'm optimistic, not far from over. Just a couple more issues, I think we got a shot.
And anyone travelling to an African country affected by a new strain of Mpox is being urged to get vaccinated. Fresh advice has been issued by the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control after the virus emerged in the Congo. More than 500 people have died on the continent so far this year. Sweden's recorded its first case, while Pakistan's trying to establish whether a person there is affected. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, it's Saturday night, folks, and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, and I can promise that you're in for a very lively show. We're going to crack on with tonight's first debate. I'm abusing position of the chair as ever, and I'm going to kick us off. Now, folks, the riots, right, they may well have fizzled out, but I think it's time we face the real problem. Two-tier identity politics is actually what's ripping Britain to shreds. You've got white working-class communities, especially in the north, feeling completely abandoned, livelihoods decimated, voices ignored, and now they're watching as the state gives preferential treatment to everyone else under the guise of diversity and inclusion. And I ask you, my friends, where does that leave us as a society? Probably headed toward the same path we've seen before. White communities demanding their own community leaders to act as brokers with the police, because that's exactly what we saw in Birmingham for mobs of Muslim men.
We knew that there was going to be a large amount of people out on that counter-protest. We knew who the vast majority of those people were. We'd had conversations in terms of what that was likely to look like, and so our policing response was commensurate to that intelligence and the information that we'd held with our partners and communities prior to that event taking place.
Even given there were so many of them clearly armed, I mean, would you do the same if it was an EDL type situation?
What I would say is that the vast majority of people that attended that protest yesterday did so law-abidingly, and they did it with the right intentions.
And that was a stark no, wasn't it? Identity politics leads to fragmentation, to division and competition to see who can shout, "I'm oppressed," the loudest. And as long as the state keeps coddling certain groups while cracking down on others, that resentment, that'll fester. It doesn't end with these riots. We'll be left with a broken society split right down racial, religious and cultural lines and have no hope of common citizenship. That flag that represents us all, that won't unite us or hold us together anymore. And I think that, my friends, would be a crying shame. Renee, are you worried about the same things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm massively worried about this. And the problem that we now have is look, nobody thinks that violence is the answer. We've said this. Nobody should be going out rioting and using violence, but we should have the right to protest, and we shouldn't be shouted down if our views don't marry with the narrative of the government or of the diverse communities who want to shout nasty words at us, you know, like far right or transphobic or Islamophobic, whatever it is. And all we will achieve as a society in doing that, in shutting down conversation, is making it worse and worse until once again the bubble bursts because people can no longer contain their anger.
Now, Emma, do you think actually there's a problem here for faith and trust in the police in general? Because something like 4 in 10 of the British people think that the British police do not act with an even keel.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have reams and reams of stories that just show that, you know, even if there are strategic reasons why they've made the decision that they've made about policing a certain protest, what people see is that they're not treating people in a way that is fair, and fairness is very important in British culture. You see the charges being dropped against those who called for the rape of Jewish daughters, and then you see the way that these protests have been policed. You see the same with Black Lives Matter and the anti-lockdown protests being treated completely differently. And the message that sends to the British public is that if you have a favourable cause, then you can get away with breaking the law however you want. But if it's a cause that is not favoured, and if you have people who, for example, feel as if they can't be heard on matters of immigration through the democratic process, that is going to build up resentment. Yeah. And when you hear people talking like this superintendent talking about community leaders, well, these are not people who are elected, nor are they people who can be removed by election because they're not elected in the first place. And so these are people who are self-appointed as community leaders who perhaps have no legitimacy democratically with the communities that they purport to represent. And so really the only people that the police strategically should be speaking to as a community leader is the MP, the elected community leader of that constituency.
I take issue with that word community, and I think there's been very good writing about this recently, that we call these groups communities because it sounds soft and cuddly, but when we get to the other side of the coin, to the white people that are protesting, they are far-right protesters, they're not a community.
Yeah, I mean, Benjamin, where are you at on what you've just heard? Common sense, I thought.
No, I mean, look, the idea that Muslim groups, areas with large Muslim populations are the only ones to have so-called or self-appointed community leaders is completely wrong. You know, when there's an incident, as there have been regrettably many with the Jewish community, the Board of Deputies, which has a democratic structure, I know, or local leaders are the people that they will liaise with. When you've had attacks on gay people, they will go to people that are organised within the LGBT community. You know, you would have Christian community leaders, right? You know, a vicar isn't elected by anybody, but they're an obvious port of call to deal with concerns of a group if, say, a church were attacked. So I think it is wrong to criticise that. And I've spoken extensively about how appalling I think the anti-Semitism has been in the last year and the attacks on Israel. But I have a problem with the people that are trying to reject that a lot of Muslims in this country, particularly Muslim women, feel extremely vulnerable in recent weeks. And I think the police are absolutely right to reach out to them. Because imagine how it feels if your mosque had bricks thrown at it or someone tried to burn it down, as has happened recently. You know, you are going to be terrified to go about your life.
But isn't it interesting that a lot of these community leaders that represent the Muslim community, no one on the left is pointing out the fact that they all seem to be men?
Yeah, well, indeed, and there is obviously a reason for that. But Adam, I want to bring you in because it strikes me from what Benjamin just said that actually, when it comes to the Christian community and all the rest of it, the police aren't saying to them, should we intervene if mobs of men carrying weapons openly, attacking pubs and all these other things? If that happens, ought we intervene? Well, the law is the law, right? It ought to be enforced regardless of your race, religion or sexuality or whatever else it might be.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do we have two-tier policing, or is it more a question of having two-tier governing? Actually, I'm glad to see people like Robert Jenrig making a strong stance on this, saying, really, leadership starts on the top. And Benjamin, I'd be interested to see what you think about this. Do we need to see more robust language from the likes of Keir Starmer and the Home Secretary on this? And perhaps the police, they do police without fear or favour. It's actually the layer above that is the real problem here.
I think police in this country are doing a bad job. I think that has far more to do with them being able to mark their own homework than either the last government or the one of the last month and a half. They seem to think they're above any criticism. And actually, if there's any degree of two-tier policing, I think it's the fact that they're more bothered about how they look in the news cycle than how they look at getting people charged and convicted of serious offences. The two-tier is the fact that if a newspaper picks something up and it doesn't go down well, then they'll panic and they'll do something about it. You know, I recently reported a serious crime to Cheshire Police, and weeks and weeks went by and they couldn't care less. So I spoke to a senior police officer and said, OK, how do I get them? They're not investigating this and there's someone at present risk. He said, put it on Twitter. I put it on Twitter. A few hours later, they were investigating it after months of silence. That is the mistake in the police. Now, yeah, I think governments should be stricter on that. But I would just point out, a friend who's a police officer, I said to him, is there two-tier policing? And he said, well, when I was dealing with the Black Lives Matter protests and the riots that also happened at the same time, most people there weren't turning up trying to attack the police. But when you've had some of these men that fantasise about Tommy Robinson, they turn up wanting to attack the police.
And what about those that turn up at protests in London shouting for jihad and intifada, who the police say, oh, well, you know, that's absolutely fine, get yourself away.
Jihad
but
has
if they shout
multiple
on the
meanings.
streets about Allah, you can bet your bottom dollar that they'll be in the slammer. Of course there's two-tier police, and I think you ultimately know that. And I think that actually you know that it's protecting certain people over basically ethnic and religious lines. And that is wrong. That foments the division and actually creates the people that you don't like in society and in politics, and actually gives them a stronger base. So I think that's why it needs to be counted.
Well, I also wonder, Benjamin, whether you have equal concerns for women who are not Muslim, who are scared to walk amongst communities which have changed beyond their recollection. They've lived there all their lives. Are they legitimate in being scared on the streets of London?
Of course, anybody that's in that situation is, right? I mean, as a gay man, I suspect those communities you're thinking about are probably quite... There's an overlap of where the fear would be. But you have to be careful. You know, when there were such serious problems with police and the black community in places like Brixton in the 80s, in the 90s. The answer to that wasn't to say, well, you know, the black people must stop being angry. The way of fixing that was to sit down with them, was to listen to them, was to have the avenue into the community.
I noticed that Benjamin didn't name the community there. I wonder whether you would be so hesitant to name the community if it were, you know, one of the ones that...
No, hang on. Let me be very clear. There is a problem with radical Islam in this country. And there is a strain of Islam that is dangerous, that is a threat to democracy, that is a threat to the rights of women and gay people. But I don't accept that trying to scar the whole community with those views is right.
We're coming back to this topic in the second hour because we're going to have the insights of Kevin Hurley, who knows a thing or two about policing in this country, to say the least. But we're going to allow Adam to lose his Saturday 5 virginity and pop his cherry.
Thanks, guys.
And get right into it. Adam, what have you got up for us?
Right, let's talk about what Labour are doing with unions and pay rises, because they've only been in power for 6 weeks, and it turns out getting around the negotiating table with these unions really means just opening the wallet. What have we seen in the last couple of weeks? Well, we've seen junior doctors get a massive pay rise. In the last few days, we have seen rail workers also get a bumper pay rise without really having to make any compromises on their side. So when they talk about getting to the negotiating table, there is no negotiation. They come cap in hand and they get what they want. Now, why is this? I'd say partly it's because these unions give so much money to Labour. ASLEF, the union we're going to discuss shortly about the rail strikes, they gave nearly £1 million to Labour historically, and 400,000 of that, about 320k actually, came in the last 4 years. Do you think that influences them? Because I certainly do. And what's going to happen next? We're already seeing it. More unions understand that what they can get away with, they'll get away with whatever they like now, because Labour are so willing to bend over backwards to please them. You'll see that with GPs, perhaps with nursing, with the nurses' union, with the board force. It's going to continue, And just wait until October when Rachel Reeves stands at the dispatch box and says, oh, guys, there's no money left. I'm so sorry. We're simply going to have to raise your taxes. Why? Because look what they've been spending your money on for the last 6 months.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more, and I think actually the genie is out of the bottle now, and once you give the Dane girl, they ask for more and more, and they don't stop coming
Well, that was
back.
actually
in the next few days,
sorry,
you
I
can see it.
couldn't disagree more.
Well, of course not, you're a lefty.
But first of all, let's just look. The Labour Party is taking less money from unions as a share of its income than it has in generations. Unite the Union, Britain's largest trade union by far, does not have a leader that supports the Labour Party. That's a historic shift. The amount of funding it's given the Labour Party is down on what it's
still have block
been.
voting?
In what? In where?
So that they actually influence all of their... members, obviously, and direct the way they're going to vote, and they have a vote within the Labour leadership election.
Yeah, it's in their DNA.
The
trade union party.
The rules have been changed, but their delegates get votes at Labour Party conference, but it doesn't mean much these days. But look, well, no, it doesn't, because they don't vote on policy.
Ignore their membership.
But look, I have a serious problem with people, right-wingers like you, Adam, who are attacking wages rising. There are two central problems in our economy. One is stagnant wages, and they've been stagnant since 2008.
What's the other one? Inflation.
They've been stagnant since... Hang on, let me finish my argument. Don't cancel me. They've been stagnant since 2008 for the average worker. The other is the fact that we live in a capitalist society, but anybody under 40 is struggling to get any capital. And to break the back of those two things, you need to pay people better, and you need to take the grip of boomers off the throat of our...
Oh, God. Here we go. Benjamin's...
You attacked old people.
Yeah,
I think
he's
you've
back
got a
on the
serious
pensioners.
problem. I think you're some kind of sociopath. This is outrageous. Honestly,
No, they are serious
I've got
issues.
a song for you.
People deserve
I've
to be
got a
paid.
song I'm going to sing. Too much money in circulation leads us directly to inflation. We'll count our blessings if we apply tight control of the money supply. You are allowing the money supply to go absolutely wild so that you can play off your trade union mates and appease the lot of them, whilst they come back and ask for more and more and more.
And
The
you
strikes
think
go
about
on
that
and
while
on
you're
and
going
on.
to sleep.
Yeah, you sing
your
that
head
to
there.
yourself until you wake up and make sense.
Benjamin, let's say everything you've just said is completely reasonable. Let's start from there.
We will.
Do you not think it would be more reasonable for them to say to the train drivers, look, of course we're going to give you this 15% pay rise, but what we would like in return is to get some of these archaic working practices. But no, what they said was, here's your 15% and it's a no-strings-attached deal. You can carry on with all the ridiculous Spanish practices that you've had forever that allow you to turn up for half an hour, be paid for a day.
Yeah.
One of those practices is that if you get interrupted by your manager on your lunch break, even if he just says hello, good afternoon to you, then you get to start your work break over from scratch. They're already earning so much more than the average person is earning. And surely at least you can recognise that Labour's reasoning on this, which is that it would cost the economy more if they were to strike more, surely you can recognise that that's like hostage taking. That reasoning opens up a gold rush of other public sector workers to strike, to cause as much economic damage as possible, so that it's less economic damage to just pay them more.
No, I find it extraordinary that so-called free speech fanatics, people like, I suspect, the rest of the table, but certainly you, Emma, have such a problem with the most powerful voice that workers have, which is the voice to unionise.
Striking isn't free speech.
It's a fundamental part of democracy and having your voice heard against
It's blackmail,
powerful brokers.
that's what it is.
It's not. And I tell you what, I was speaking to some civil servants this week who were telling me that the people on the graduate scheme in the civil service often can't afford to live in London. They can't go to their jobs in Whitehall from somewhere nearby because the pay is too bad.
Well, they shouldn't have so many civil servants
Junior
then.
doctors struggle to afford to live in London, are living in tiny rooms just to do their jobs.
Were you talking to them in the office, by the way? Because apparently only 17% of them go to the office.
They don't have to live in London, do they?
I was talking to them near their office.
Train drivers are on 70k.
Hang on, we're going to have to leave that there. But Richard says Adam is spot on, as left the union, got exactly what they wanted with absolutely no productivity improvements whatsoever. And then Jeremiah says, I'd automate the lot of them, including Benjamin Butterworth. Now, I think that is automated already, to be honest. I'm pretty sure it must be an AI bot. Still to come tonight, we're going to be discussing how the Church of England is dropping the use of a word within its lexicon, the word being church. But next, we'll be discussing sports presenter Laura Woods, who has revealed that she has received death threats over comments on the Olympic boxing gender row. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, to enrich us on the best cheeses and wine to buy, I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of Inflorescence, Jacinta Madison Wilson. Jacinta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also, thank you so much for bringing what is
what a Sunday you're having.
of wonderful... What do we have before us?
So, we've got 3 gorgeous wines to try today. We've got an English sparkling, we've got a beautiful rosé and a dessert wine, and, of course, cheese.
Wonderful.
And paired them all beautifully.
Now, English sparkling wine has had a bit of a renaissance.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
To use a French word to describe English sparkling wine. It's having a bit of a moment in the sun.
Absolutely. I just think it's so exciting that this is right on our doorstep, essentially, an hour out of London, and we're around beautiful vineyards.
The chalk sort of sediment is exactly the same as the Champagne region of France.
Yeah, our soils are really similar. We use the same grape varieties a lot of the time. We make it in exactly the same way as Champagne. Our climate is like Champagne was 40 to 50 years ago. So we're really kind of drinking it blind. You almost wouldn't know that you're not drinking champagne. But it's right here on our doorstep. We can stay local now.
Absolutely marvellous. Well, we've got... what is the best order to start?
OK, well, we're going to start with sparkling, because all things in life should start with sparkling. I got married a month ago, and this was actually the... Thank you so much. This was the wine I chose to have as our first wine that we served the guests. This is from a winery called Bluebell, which is in Sussex, and I've chosen to pair this with a lovely... kind of the English version of Camembert, which is called Tunworth. Okay. It's a very classic pairing of Champagne and Brie. So we're kind of going to do the English version of that now.
Classic.
Absolutely. Are you ready to get stuck in?
I am so...
OK.
Hang on. Is it cheese first or wine first?
I'd have a little sip of the wine first.
Sip of the wine, bite
have
of the
a little
cheese.
bite of the cheese and then some more wine. Get it all mixed up in there.
It's like a cheese sandwich.
Exactly. Yes.
OK, here we go. Cheers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Thank you very much for your company and for all of your views about tonight's topics in gbnews.com/your say. John says very simply, ageism. I think you've got a problem. I really do. And Anne says, sorry, but Butterworth is wrong on so many levels. And actually, ex-military says, how about performance-related pay for train drivers? It would be a massive saving. Then apply the same to politicians and civil servants. How about political commentators?
Oh, God,
and the nation's purse would be overflowing. And, well, you go back to a lot of people saying that it's time to automate the trains, and I'm afraid they're losing the public on this, right? That's the problem. If they want the public to continue to support them, I think the blackmail of strikes and this constant demand for these massive inflation-busting pay rises, there are many people in society who aren't getting these pay rises. Pensioners certainly aren't. And Benjamin, I think you ought to remember, one day you will be a pensioner.
I just want to quickly point out, the people that have a problem with train drivers pay going up. I never hear them saying that the cap on bankers' bonuses shouldn't be lifted, and I think that's where a lot more of our money is.
We're not paying for bankers' bonuses.
No, exactly.
Of course we are.
All right, come on,
Who else do you
Renee.
think is?
We're going to get to the common sense of Dr. Renee after that. Come on, Renee, what have you got for us?
OK, so this week, the trans activist lobby proved to us that there is actually not a toxic debate around the trans issue. There is just toxic trans activists who don't want there to be any debate. Sports commentator Laura Woods this week faced death threats to both her and her unborn child for uttering 3 little words. And those words were, "Great work, Ollie." The Ollie in question was Oliver Brown, the Telegraph journalist, who actually wrote a fairly non-controversial piece on the history behind 2 allegedly XY boxers, that's male if they are XY, in the boxing ring at the Olympics, being able to pummel women in the female competition. The IOC, to be fair, did say that the IBA Boxing Association had been de-recognised by them, so they wouldn't recognise the tests. There's a lot around this that could be said. Laura Woods is a fairly left-wing sports commentator, and after those 3 little words, she tells us that she got death threats to her, wishes that her unborn child would die, questioned her own gender, she's pregnant, I think it's fairly clear what she is, and she was attacked with words that described her female anatomy and were just basically bullying, violent and disgusting. What we're actually seeing in this debate now is it's possibly the only forum left where men can actually scream violent abuse at women, go up to women, be in their faces and abuse them and push them around. I wonder if, actually, although this is cloaked in the be kind mantra, this is the only forum where these young men who are so disillusioned with being called toxic are able to actually demonstrate their toxic masculinity and bully women without any recourse or any repercussions.
Renee, did we have a tweet or something from that?
We did have a tweet from Laura Woods.
Could I see that tweet from Laura Woods? There we are. Well, goodness gracious me, I need some thick glasses for that. But you can see that there's a tweet there. That seems pretty fair enough.
She detailed everything that she'd been sent, how horrific it had been, just because she said those 3 words, "Great work, Ollie."
Great work, Ollie. So that's the gist of what's going on in this tweet here, where she's saying, "Great work, Ollie," and she's been met by a barrage of...
Barrage.
Yeah, OK. I mean...
Death threats.
Well, Benjamin Butterworth, where do we draw the line here? I mean, are people like Renee sort of... Is it open season for people with those kinds of views?
Well, it doesn't matter what the topic is or what the forum is or who is involved. You know, threats, aggressive language, death threats is not acceptable. You know, that shouldn't be such a complicated thing to say. But on the internet, a lot of people who would say otherwise behave in a way that they wouldn't in the workplace. I think that behaviour is much broader than this topic. But what I would say is that I think this has been an attack on a woman, because the Algerian boxer has only ever been recognised as a woman, has never tried to live as anything other than a woman, was born a woman, has a female passport.
Lives as a man outside of boxing now.
That's not true. That's not true at all.
It is.
And so, you know, if you are to say that everybody should be assessed for their sex, then that's one thing. But she has been on the receiving end of an unbelievable amount of abuse when she hasn't broken any rules at any point in the process. And can I just finish quickly to say, can you imagine what it's like to have possibly millions of tweets pointed at you while you're turning up to work? I think that is a horrific
Can you
way
imagine
to be
what it's like to be a woman in a boxing ring who's worked for your entire life for that accolade at the Olympics, to know that you are going to face somebody with the strength of a man who is going to beat you and win? Can you imagine?
I think it's crude to put this in the language of, you know, something more like domestic abuse. You know, I don't like boxing full stop, but it is ultimately trying to beat other people up.
Hang on.
That's the sport. It's not like being fighting on the street.
Let's not rehash the debate of the Olympics, because we have done that before, but what I'm interested in is getting to the heart of why it's seen as acceptable to attack those sorts of views. Because Babs has said on our GB News / Your Say, she says, XY is male, end of, can't compete against XX. Now, Babs, for saying that, were they to tweet that as Laura Woods, you know, a commentator with significant reach, Is it acceptable?
Well, thank you, Babs, because she's right. There is no nuance between whether you're XX or you're XY, or whether somebody has. Hang on, you've given your little monologue, Benjamin. Let me have.
So a man can have a vagina.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Because both of those things can happen.
If you'd let me finish my point, then you might understand what I'm about to say, but you've jumped the gun. So my point was going to be, yes, some people are born intersex, some people have certain biological abnormalities, but the exceptions prove the rule. People are either XX or they're XY, and in a situation like this, it is absolutely right, and it's not using the language of domestic abuse, because we are talking about a man hitting a woman. It is boxing, after all. And so there really isn't very much nuance there in terms of the XX, XY, because, yes, of course, you also do have natural variation within the sexes, but that's within a certain range. And somebody who is born with, someone who is born as a biological man will have a much greater range when it comes to natural testosterone variation than a woman. And so it doesn't matter whether or not that person has certain physical abnormalities in the way that
People of your views have spent the last year laughing and mocking and saying it's not possible for a man to have a cervix. And now
because it's not.
Now you're saying the opposite.
No,
now you're
that
saying
is not what I'm saying.
chromosomes and genitals can be completely different.
That's not what I've said.
But that is what you're saying, because that's what's happened.
That's actually not what I've said.
I'll tell you what's happened here. These boxers, and they are attracted to sport because they're very good, because they look like women when they're born. It's very sad. But they actually have internal testes which work just like men's in these cases. And they get the puberty of a man and they get the strength.
But what they do not have is a cervix.
Well, they don't have is a cervix. They don't have any function in female anatomy.
Adam, one of our comments says, I've been wondering why it's OK and acceptable for the far left to be nasty and threatening against people and not the other way around. Yeah. Is there a double standard even online?
I don't know. Do you guys not think this is just a perennial debate and we're never going to make any progress on this?
I bloody hope so, because it just strikes me as common sense, right? It's a mutable fact.
Yeah, but there's never any common ground achieved on this, is there? Ever?
Well, that's because, I think we go back to the point. No, it's because the trans activist lobby, which is mainly men, I'm not talking about trans people, I'm talking about the activist lobby, are vile men who want to shout women down. We see it with Let Women Speak. Every time they try and have a public meeting, they have balaclavaed men screaming in their faces.
I'm sorry, but to claim that the people that think trans people should be able to use the loo and go to work and be free to live their lives in the same way that anybody else is.
To
call them balaclavaed men is a distortion.
Not what we're talking about.
That's not what Renee said. That's literally not what Renee said.
OK, well, we'll leave that one there, but Paul says Woodsy should have said she's a Muslim. There would be arrests everywhere and police kicking in the doors. She doesn't deserve this abuse. I'm very sad for her. Now, you're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News. Coming up, we'll be discussing the Church of England, who are dropping the word church, can you believe it, in favour of relevant and modern-sounding descriptions. Benjamin Butterworth has drafted them himself. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Over the next 24 hours, high pressure largely holding on across the UK, keeping it fairly dry and settled. A few showers still in the flow, and we can see that on the bigger picture. Generally low pressure to the north, high pressure extending in from the southwest, keeping most weather systems at bay for the rest of the weekend. Through this evening and overnight, largely dry across much of the country. A few showers still possible across parts of Scotland, northern England, down into Wales and the West Country. But most places dry as we head through the night, and towns and cities generally holding up in double figures, but in the countryside dipping down to around 7 or 8 degrees. So a bit of a fresh start to Sunday, but there'll be plenty of sunny spells. Showers, though, possible in a few places, most prevalent across central and northern parts of Scotland. Temperatures here first thing Sunday morning around 10 to 12 Celsius, so on the fresh side, best of the sunshine towards Aberdeenshire. Northern Ireland, Northern England also a few showers possible, largely in the west, the east generally dry, and 1 or 2 showers for Wales and the West Country. Parts of the Midlands over into East Anglia, southeast England, plenty of sunshine to start Sunday. Through the day, well, that high pressure generally keeps things dry and settled for many parts. More in the way of sunny spells for parts of Wales, western parts of England, Northern Ireland that saw quite a cloudy picture on Saturday. A few showers still possible across Scotland, but they do start to ease later in the day. Breezy here, temperatures on the cool side, 15, 16 Celsius. In the sunshine, rising into the low 20s, highs around 25 Celsius for London. Then it's all changed slowly through Monday as a weather system moves in from the Atlantic. Outbreaks of rain pushing in across Northern Ireland. The winds picking up through the Irish Sea as well. Gales developing later on in the day. Best of the sunshine holding on across the southeast. Temperatures here around 25 or 26 Celsius and staying unsettled right through much of the week. See you soon.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have saved Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. I have just had to wrestle Emma Webb from Benjamin Butterworth's person. But as always, thank you very much for all of your views about tonight's topics. Don't do that again, Emma. It was very naughty. Now, Barbara's written in, and Barbara says, does Benjamin hate women so much that he's happy for women to be hurt by men? There's something missing in his thought process. Is that true?
No, obviously.
Valerie says, why can't the people who threatened Laura Woods be fast-tracked by the police and be looking at 2 years in prison like the riot defendants? Would it be because of two-tier policing by any chance? And Anne Sewell says, will the C of E become the M of me? Me. Is it the Church of Meghan Markle, I wonder? And one of our other comments says, by S. Atkinson, regarding the church, please read this. As a Christian, I try to support my local church as much as possible, but Justin Welby is an absolute embarrassment. To rebrand the church as New Things, yes, New Things, is like Royal Mail rebranding for a whole new era of diversity. Even Henry VIII remained a traditionalist. His anger was with Rome, not theology. He hated being told what to do. These changes coming from the top down, all at a time when our churches need greater donations, will drive traditional Christians away, who are the beating heart within church communities. And that leads me very nicely on to a woman who is one of those people and who has some very strong words for the Archbishop of Woke, Mr. Welby. Emma Webb, take it away.
I think that the viewers have done my bit for me there. I think it was you, Darren, wasn't it, who joked that it would be the Mosque of England. Maybe that's what's meant by the M of E. But I think that the bishops who are obviously running the shows, the commissars, the apparatchiks of the Church of England, should go and do something else. If they don't want to run a church, then they should go and do something else. And that is exactly what they've been doing. So we've seen in the last week that on one of the most important feasts in the Christian calendar, the Feast of the Assumption of Mary, they decided to close the church and instead to host yet another silent disco at the centre of Anglicanism at Canterbury Cathedral. And now we have this news that they're also wanting to drop the word church and are in fact increasingly dropping the word church across the country because, as Darren already mentioned, they want something more relevant and modern sounding, and so they're going with things like worshipping communities or new things. And I think, you know, we're seeing this across the board, silent discos in various cathedrals. There's one silent disco and worship at All Hallows in Bow. There's a free mass at St Barnabas's. And it seems as if the leadership of the Church of England are doing their absolute utmost to change the church into anything other than a church. And so I think that if they want to run a woke corporate or silent discos or be in the hospitality industry, they should go and do that. So the bishop should resign, and most central among them, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has to go.
Well done, Emma. Can we get that back up again and just explain what this is for our viewers? So for those watching on television, we have the advertisement for one of the churches. Is that Canterbury Cathedral?
Yeah.
Canterbury Cathedral website, that is. And it's 80s silent disco. They're all boogieing away. And the tweet said, oh, the evensong service is still going ahead on this feast day. Wasn't it? It was a feast day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Canterbury Cathedral, the mother church of the established church in this country, said the service will still be going ahead, but they're having preparation for a silent disco. And there's that tweet there saying that, for our viewers, saying that the church will indeed be closed, part of it will be, from 5 o'clock for this for these.
And it's not just Canterbury Cathedral. It's there are bishops across the country who are not doing their job of being custodians of our churches.
Over it, Emma.
No, I will not get over it.
I think, church is dead, religion is over, we're all having
religion's over, Islam's going...
So we should all listen to Benjamin's opinion about the future of the church. You could go and work for the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Islam, now you're saying religion's dead?
I think Benjamin could work for the Archbishop of Canterbury with that attitude.
Everyone's zoning out. Look, the fact is, if it gets people to go to
No, but this is the problem.
Beautiful buildings, that they're enjoying them, they're being useful, maybe it generates money.
They're not. No, they're not being used for their purpose, and this is the point. It's bringing people in for a silent disco. It is not only is it not the proper use of the church, but it's also sacrilege.
Would you rather it be empty, because that's what it is most
No,
Sundays.
I would rather it was being used as a church, because the bishops are not doing a proper job. And you might not care about this, but I, as an Anglican, do care about this, and there are many people around the country who do.
As the rest of the panel could confirm, lecturing people doesn't persuade them. So I've been trying for a year and a half.
Benjamin, I know that part of it is a bit funny, silent disco in a church, and I'm not religious, so I come at this from a really, interesting place where I don't go to church every Sunday. However, I do live opposite two very big churches, and I have made the point of taking my little one, age 4 or 5, up to the church to let her have a look around, to explain to her what it is. She's in awe of it. She really thinks it's the most amazing place, and there is something very spiritual about churches, whether you're religious or not. So maybe what we need is for these archbishops of Canterbury's and bishops to be calling for parents to just bring their children to
Wait till she discovers silent discos. She'll love that.
Well, they should be trying to make the atmosphere sacred and serious, rather than doing things like putt-putt courses and skateboarding that brings people into the church, but just as if it's some kind of community centre. It's just another beautiful building somewhere to have a party. There was recently a case at a May Ball in Cambridge that was reported on by Stephen Edgington, GB News' very own, of them doing a naked drawing class in front of the altar, bearing themselves naked towards the altar. It's so disrespectful, not only to Christians, but also to the heritage of this country.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the rich inheritance that's been handed down to us, actually, if I can be a bit worthy for a second, I think one day this country's going to need its churches again. And I think
it needs them now.
Well, we do, certainly. But I think in the future we'll maybe be more willing to actually use them. And what will we have done if we said to that inheritance that's been handed down to us, well, to hell with it, we're going to use them as glorified helpers or whatever
and I
else.
promise you, this is not happening in synagogues or mosques. They take their religion seriously and they call people to it. We should be doing
And it's the unseriousness that chases people away.
We'll leave that one there. Folks, you're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News. Coming up, we'll be discussing self-checkouts, which are to be cut back in the supermarket chain Morrison's, as their boss admits they've gone too far. Do you think that? Let me know. gbnews.com/your say. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
A court on Wednesday ruled that a teenager was wrongly ignored before being forced into end-of-life care. Sudiksha Thirumalesh, who was 19, died last year after being prevented from travelling abroad for treatment after doctors said her condition was incurable. Doctors said Ms. Thirumalesh objection to their decision was unreasonable and that she should have all life-sustaining treatment ended and be put on a palliative care pathway. Last August, a ruling said that the teenager lacked mental capacity to make her own decisions, but 3 judges in the Court of Appeal overturned that decision last week. Lawyers said the move reaffirms the right of patients to disagree with their doctors. The teenager remained fully conscious while being treated by the University Hospitals Birmingham NHS Foundation Trust. Well, to discuss this tragic case, Sudiksha's father, Thirumalesh, and brother, Varshan, join me now. Thank you so much for joining me in these desperately sad circumstances. This is very important for other people who may find themselves in a similar position, that they will be able to make decisions about their own care with the support of their families, rather than the sometimes arrogance of the medical profession who think that they know best. So you must be, I hope, very reassured by this judgment that Sudiksha has achieved something for other people.
Yes, definitely, because this arrogance transformed into cruelty towards my sister's care and ill treatment of the whole family. They think they are on the top of the hierarchical spectrum, and they treated us like we were on the bottom of the lower end of the chains, or rather as low class, but we ensured that our class remained.
GB News, the People's Channel. Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Right, it's time for our last debate of this hour. And unfortunately, my friends, it's time for Benjamin Butterworth.
Last on the conveyor belt of debates is that supermarkets are changing their tune on the prevalence of self-checkouts. Now, for the last decade, we've all got used to robots passing through our fish fingers and smiley faces as we try to get our shopping. And I think some people have got quite annoyed by it. So in the past couple of days, the bosses at Morrison's, one of the country's biggest supermarkets, have said, actually, no, it's gone too far. We've got too many self-checkouts. And this comes a week after Asda, which is struggling with its sales, said that they're hiring more humans to do checkout because they think people no longer like having to do their own job, checking out their food and drinks when they leave the supermarket. Now, I sometimes like not having to talk to anyone. What do you think of this, Dr. Renee?
Reciprocated.
Yes, yeah. They like not talking to me, I think might be more accurate. You know, even the robots don't.
I worry that we have a whole group of pensioners, actually people over 50, who quite often don't talk to another human being in a week. And loneliness and isolation is one of the biggest killers in our society. It really leaves people out there in ill health and it affects their mental health. So for me, people should have the opportunity to go and talk to people in society who are serving them, not machines. It also gives people jobs.
That's what Benjamin wants. He wants life to be hard for people.
Nobody talks to Darren outside the studio, so is that why you go to Tesco or Morrison's or anywhere?
Well, Sharon says, I love self-checkout, but people with children, the disabled, the not so dexterous, older, early dementia and all the rest of it, they find them challenging and they really like the social aspect.
Maybe Benjamin's being ableist.
Well, yes, he's certainly ageist. And I worked at Marks and Spencer, 10 years ago, something like that. And I always had... whenever I was on the checkout tills, I always had a queue, I'm very proud to say, because the older people used to like coming to speak to me, because I think mentally I am an old soul, and probably appearance-wise as well. And actually, you know, the fact of the matter was, whenever I was on self-checkout, it was so soul-destroying. Yeah. You just have people that, you're not there, right? You're not a person, it's just transaction and then they're out.
Does Morrison's have some sort of pastoral care function? I mean, aren't we just here to buy our groceries?
No, look, they are there. What does it matter? Well, if you want to serve your customers and be there for your customers...
It's also, I think, we live in a world where everybody's on their screens all the time, particularly children. And there's something nice about going into a shop, interacting with a human being, and actually looking at someone in the eyes. It has a psychological effect on people.
And to that point, then, is there, in the root cause of market competition and capitalism, they're there to make money for their shareholders.
Well, maybe people would prefer to go to a shop where they can see somebody. And having a mix is good. I don't like going to a shop where I can't choose between the two.
Yeah,
I generally, personally, choose self-checkout. That's because I'm a bit antisocial. But I don't think they have a pastoral function. But I do think that shops are part of a I don't want to use a horrible word, community. And I think it is important for human beings to have that face-to-face interaction with people and get to know the people who work in their shops. It's not nice for the employees either, as Darren was saying.
They'll still be stacking the shelves. They'll still be around in the supermarket. I'd imagine the reason Morrison's are back on this is because less efficient.
You can't go talk to them whilst they're stacking the shelves because they'll get wrong by the bosses, can you?
But, do you know, sometimes I'm in these shops and I think, God, I'm going to start charging £9 an hour the amount of work I'm doing just to get out. But, you know, I think you've made a really good point. We spend our whole lives looking at screens and, you don't even need to go into a supermarket to get your goods. So if you're going in there, is it not healthy on a broader societal level that we interact with each other? Because the rudest people you see are in self-checkouts, and they've got all these cameras, all these CCTV. In Sainsbury's and Waitrose, they've got it right in your face.
It's horrible, isn't it?
Jaman says, I'd like you to handle my melons, Darren.
Oh, he's Nana's favourite.
Well, Adam can help you with your cherries. And Colin says, I'm not a fan of self-checkouts, but we'll use them if the queue is shorter. Massive fan of driverless trains, though, so it's not that I'm a first.
There is a bit of a contradiction in people's arguments there.
Well,
can't talk to the train driver, though, can you? Might be a bit distracting.
Yes, Alan says you haven't mentioned the real problem, shoplifting. I mean, you did touch on it there, Benjamin.
Do you know, I used to live by the flagship Sainsbury's store, and it had a gate which you had to put your receipt in. So you had the cameras watching your self-checkout, a gate as you left out, another gate, and then a security guard. It was like Alcatraz, just to buy some fish fingers.
Yeah. We'll leave that one there. Loads more to come, my friends, on the show tonight, including a big interview with a former police and crime commissioner on whether we have two-tier policing in this country and how we can go about restoring faith in British policing after those riots. I'll see you after this.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Over the next 24 hours, high pressure largely holding on across the UK, keeping it fairly dry and settled. A few showers still in the flow, and we can see that on the bigger picture. Generally low pressure to the north, high pressure extending in from the southwest, keeping most weather systems at bay for the rest of the weekend. Through this evening and overnight, largely dry across much of the country. A few showers still possible across parts of Scotland, northern England, down into Wales and the West Country. But most places dry as we head through the night, and towns and cities generally holding up in double figures, but in the countryside dipping down to around 7 or 8 degrees. So a bit of a fresh start to Sunday, but there'll be plenty of sunny spells. Showers, though, possible in a few places, most prevalent across central and northern parts of Scotland. Temperatures here first thing Sunday morning around 10 to 12 Celsius, so on the fresh side, best of the sunshine towards Aberdeenshire. Northern Ireland, Northern England also a few showers possible, largely in the west, the east generally dry, and 1 or 2 showers for Wales and the West Country. Parts of the Midlands over into East Anglia, South East England, plenty of sunshine to start Sunday. Through the day, well, that high pressure generally keeps things dry and settled for many parts. More in the way of sunny spells for parts of Wales, western parts of England, Northern Ireland that saw quite a cloudy picture on Saturday. A few showers still possible across Scotland, but they do start to ease later in the day. Breezy here, temperatures on the cool side, 15, 16 Celsius. In the sunshine, rising into the low 20s, highs around 25 Celsius for London. Then it's all changed slowly through Monday as a weather system moves in from the Atlantic. Outbreaks of rain pushing in across Northern Ireland. The winds picking up through the Irish Sea as well. Gales developing later on in the day. Best of the sunshine holding on across the southeast. Temperatures here around 25 or 26 Celsius and staying unsettled right through much of the week. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
With record temperatures expected this week, how do zoos keep their cooler creatures cold? Well, at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, the polar bears are enjoying a vegetable ice block.
Polar bears, they do have quite a variety of different temperatures that they naturally do find. Once they're moving off these polar ice caps, they are in the likes of down in the areas of Canada, Hudson Bay. Naturally, they were finding polar bears in 35-degree temperatures year upon year. So they are very much used to warm temperatures and heat waves as such. What you'll tend to find is they'll go for a good swim and then go for a snooze in the shade thereafter.
Not wanting to miss out, the sea lions are treated to a huge fish lolly.
In the hot weather, it's really important to give them ice because these guys, they don't drink salt water. These pools are actually saltwater pools. They actually drink fresh water. They've got 2 freshwater pools in their house, but again, being able to provide that in their outside enclosure is also really important. So offering them ice with their fish is not only enriching, but it's actually beneficial to their welfare as well.
Other animals like the lemurs will be basking in the sun, but also cooling down with frozen sweet potato.
So we've got 3 different species of lemur here. They come in all different shapes, colours, sizes, but they are native to Madagascar. Madagascar can get quite hot, understandably, so throughout the cold months here in Yorkshire, we do give them a nice heated house all year round, but especially making sure it's nice and warm in the winter for them. And it does mean that in the hot spells as well that we're able to keep our eyes on them and try and give them things that make them a bit more comfortable with that incoming hot weather as well.
The frozen food on offer here certainly has the seal of approval on what could be the hottest day of the year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Folks, it's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Dr. Renee, Emma Webb, Adam Cherry and Benjamin Butterworth. Plenty more to come, including a big interview with a former police and crime commissioner, we're going to get onto that in a second, on how we can restore faith in British policing after the riots. It's 7 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. So as I say, my friends, still to come, we're going to be discussing two-tier policing and how to restore trust in a police force that are, I think, frankly, 4 in 10 of us saying we don't trust the police or have faith in them is pretty damning. And soon it'll be time for our Saturday scrap on whether we need fewer universities and fewer Mickey Mouse degrees. Dr. Renee and Benjamin Butterworth are going to go head to head. Then we'll be answering your questions in Ask the Five. Please do send them through to www.gbnews.com/yoursay. First of all, though, we're going to get you Saturday night news with Sophia Wensler.
Darren, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 7 o'clock. A fire at Somerset House in central London has been contained after around 125 firefighters were called to tackle the blaze. Priceless artworks, including a Van Gogh painting, have not been damaged, and all the public are safe after the fire ripped through the roof of the historic building earlier. The venue is now closed, and all the events for this evening have been cancelled. There are no reported injuries, and the cause of the fire is currently under investigation. In Ireland, a teenage boy has appeared in court charged over a stabbing outside Renmore Barracks. Army chaplain Father Paul Murphy posted on social media to say he was doing OK after receiving treatment for serious but non-life-threatening injuries. The 16-year-old boy, who cannot be named because he's a minor, was refused bail and remanded in custody. During the hearing, the court heard that there were indications of an extreme Islamist mindset. GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White has more for us now.
Well, this short court hearing gave us the firmest indication yet of a terrorist motivation behind this attack at the Irish Army barracks on Thursday night. The court heard that the 16-year-old appeared to have a radical Islamist mindset and possess material linked to the radical group Islamic State. Father Paul Murphy, the army chaplain, was returning to the barracks late on Thursday night in his car when he was approached and attacked. Security cameras recorded more than 20 separate stabbing motions. The police suffered deep lacerations. The teenager has been remanded back into custody.
That was Mark White speaking there. Thank you very much. Now, police across the country are on high alert today as protests and counter-protests take place nationwide. It follows the arrest of 460 people so far linked to the violent disorder earlier this month, with hundreds now facing court. Tensions are expected in Birmingham, with the group Stand Up to Racism also taking to the streets. Meanwhile, our reporter Ray Addison has been speaking to protesters in Dover.
Calling me a racist and they're calling me a fascist and a Nazi. I'm just British. In my country, holding my Union Jack, looking out for my children and grandchildren, whom I've got 3 of.
I love my country and I want our future, our kids to have something when they grow up, I don't want them to inherit something that's, it'll be dangerous for them in the future. They'll have no facilities to use, they don't get a doctor's appointment.
I've come down here just really so I can actually see what the reaction is. There must be 50 police here now protecting 4 of us. It's because they want to attack us, and yet we're the ones that are being called the aggressors. We're the ones that are being called the fascists and the racists.
And the government is being warned it will have to increase funding to meet its pledge to end the so-called 8 a.m. scramble for GP appointments. The Doctors Association claims at least £35 more per patient per year is needed to match funding levels from a decade ago. During the election campaign, Labour said it would make it easier to book appointments. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. It's still Saturday night, my friends, and you're still with the Saturday 5. Thank you very much. I'm Darren Grimes, and I can promise that you're in for another very lively hour. We're going to crack on with tonight's big interview. Now, the riots have fizzled out, right, but is it time that we faced the real problem, that two-tier identity politics that's ripping Britain to shreds? You've got white working-class communities, especially in areas like the north, feeling completely abandoned, but we've just seen those protests on Dover being branded as racist, 50 police there. Their livelihoods may have been decimated, voices ignored. Where does that actually leave us? Well, maybe headed towards the same path we've seen before, right, where maybe we're going to end up with white communities demanding their own community leaders to act as brokers with the police, as we saw in Birmingham for mobs of Muslim men. This, as we see in Birmingham, predictions of more unrest.
We knew that there was going to be a large amount of people out on that counter-protest. We knew who the vast majority of those people were. We'd had conversations in terms of what that was likely to look like. And so our policing response was commensurate to that intelligence and the information that we'd held with our partners and communities prior to that event taking place.
Even given there were so many of them clearly armed, I mean, would you do the same if it was an EDL type situation?
What I would say is that the vast majority of people that attended that protest yesterday did so law-abidingly, and they did it with the right intentions.
Now, that's the kind of identity politics that leads to the fragmentation of society and a competition about oppression, isn't it? And as long as the state keeps coddling up to these certain groups, it's going to fester resentment. So how do we solve this issue? Well, to discuss, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome who should have been head of the Met Police, the former Detective Chief Superintendent for the Met, Kevin Hurley. Kevin, thank you very much for giving up time on your trip abroad to join us on this very important topic. You've just seen there those clips that were had during the news where people were being sort of attacked at Dover for protesting against the boats that are coming over in vast numbers to this country. Record just last week, 700 came over in one single Sunday. And for protesting that, they're saying that there's a two-tier element to the actual policing element of such protests. Would you accept that that's the case?
Yes, we've had two-tier policing for at least 30 years, where police officers very quickly learn to tread on eggshells if they're dealing with different ethnic minority communities in the UK. They're very, very sensitive to being called racist or bigoted or in any way biased. And the net result of that is police tend to back off or bend over backwards or avoid confrontation when perhaps confrontation is what's required. I personally have always taken the view that it doesn't matter who you are all equal under the law and should be dealt with in the same way. So if it requires a gentle word of advice, fine. And if it requires really robust responses, then that should happen as well. But the bottom line on it is police for far too long have, if you like, pussyfooted around certain issues. And we saw it then with that superintendent there in West Midlands who failed to address the question about there were people from a particular group who were carrying weapons, ignored the question and left it in the hands of community leaders. It is not acceptable for any particular group in society to think they are above the law. And for far too long, policing has backed off. And you said I should have perhaps been commissioner in the Met, who knows? However, I can tell you one of the issues that caused me problems when I was serving was the fact that I took a zero-tolerance policing approach to all forms of wrongdoing, regardless of where and when you come from.
Well, hang on, Kevin. It caused you issues with who? Who is that? Is that coming from the upper echelons of the force itself?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
The senior leadership of the police service, who always will take the line of least resistance to avoid problems. The fact of the matter is, there are people within our society who are disproportionately involved in crime, and we are no longer in it, but the police service back off. And it's not the constables who are doing this, or indeed the sergeants or even inspectors, but it's certainly chief police officers. And once people reach chief inspector superintending rank in the police, they tend to look for where their next rank is, where their next promotion is, their next pension uplift, quite frankly, because I was part of that. And therefore, they will toe the party line.
Now, Kevin, I must ask you, because, you know, you were, in your opinion and in mine, actually, as well, you would have been a really good top cheese of the Metropolitan Police. Do you think, actually, that because you stand against this identity politics, and perhaps we've seen this since the 1980s, Kevin, perhaps it was laudable at the time when, you know, there were protests in the 1980s with black communities who felt that they were mistreated by the police force. And in response to that, we put in place these measures, these diversity and inclusion measures, and especially with the report that came after the murder of Stephen Lawrence. And the fact of the matter was that the response to those moments in our history has been to put in place this kind of policing. But it's had an effect of actually diminishing trust, respect and faith in the force. So how do we get that balance right? Because right now there are a hell of a lot of white people who are saying, well, actually, I feel exactly as black people did in the 1980s.
Well, I think the present Commissioner of the Met has got a real challenge on. I don't envy him in the balance he's trying to take. I suppose the best thing you could say if you're the Commissioner of the Met is if you've managed to upset everybody, you've probably made the right decision. But the answer to the question is that the public, I suppose, no, the fact is the public are losing confidence in the police because they are not delivering basic services that they expect from their police in terms of dealing with antisocial behaviour on their streets, responding to burglaries, and when they see various groups, regardless of who they are or what they're protesting about, see them actively breaking the law and no action being taken against them. Yes, the police have got real challenges in terms of manpower and resources, but they have yet to bite the bullet and realise as the demographics of the country have changed, they need to adopt methods for dealing with public disorder that are very, very effective abroad, such as the use of water cannon. And we could be even cleverer and put index marker solutions like smart water in that spray everybody. And the net result would be that all these drunken louts that have turned up causing trouble in the last week or so in the UK, instead of the police saying, oh, we've got 500, we've got 1,000, they could actually get every single one of them if they'd sprayed them with a marker solution, because you can't get it off.
Right.
So
yeah.
the police have got to go a long way in terms of demonstrating they can regain control against these jobbish elements, whether they are white drunken scum, Asian youths from the local mosque who are turning up causing a problem, or they're anti-Nazi leagues or whatever. Nobody has got confidence now in this country that they can take control. And they've therefore got to change the paradigm of how they deal with public order and start to use modern methods.
So, Kevin, then, just finally, before I go back to the panel, is it your view, because there are many people getting in touch right now who, by the way, love you and what you have to say, but they're asking the question, is what's happening in response to these riots, and, you know, as you mentioned, I concur what you've just said, that those setting fire to buildings and seeking to harm people and all the rest of it, they are and deserve to be criminalised. But is there an issue here that actually the enforcement of this plays into that two-tier narrative? Because there are people who, for example, the Manchester airport couple, there is the fact that Hare Hills, what happened in Hare Hills and Leeds hasn't been dealt with in the same way. You can pinpoint moments over recent times where the police have not acted like this, and there hasn't been this gloating of charging and arrests online and by politicians, that people are starting to say, well, there's one rule for one and a completely different one for others. And is there a worry for you as a former copper that actually that's going to do pretty big damage to trust and faith in police?
Of course it will. I mean, the fact of the matter is, quite rightly, very robust actions being taken at all the drunken louts, the morons who turned up trying to set fire to hotels, attacking police and so on, quite rightly. But what we now want to be able to see from a point of view of public ordinance, the point I've just made, is whoever turns up on the street, quite frankly, if they are causing a problem, they need to be dealt with equally robustly. But there are other issues that the police are failing to deal with firmly and appropriately, such as inner city knife crime, particularly in London, where stop and search has dropped across London by about 2/3.
Well, because that's racist as well, right? That's racist, even though it saves black people's lives, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, the bottom line is because the constables on the street have decided it's not in their best interest to stop and search people, particularly from the black community, who are the ones doing the dying and the ones doing the stabbing. So the people actually doing the crying are black mums who lose their sons to knives or guns, or lose their sons to life imprisonment when they're convicted of murder.
And
So
I remember
that kind of
Cressida
backing
Dick
off-
said the same thing. The former Met Chief, she said the same thing. But we'll leave that there. Kevin, thank you very much for your time and for, as I say, giving up time whilst you're away. Thank you very much as ever. That's the former Detective Chief Superintendent for the Met Police, Kevin Hurley. Now, my friends, basically to give you an overview of what's been said there is a sense that, in Kevin's professional opinion, as a former serving officer himself, high up within the service, that actually people like him with his opinion are pushed out because of the fact they think diversity and inclusion has absolutely skewed the priorities of the police force into creating several tiers of policing. How do we actually combat that? How do we... Because the reason being, you could argue, was that in the 1980s, there were the riots by black people over what they argued and what many argue were justifiable concerns of unfair policing towards them. Now, though, in reverse, you're seeing white people saying, well, hang on, what's happened in the 1980s is happening to us now. So, you know, firstly, do you accept that that's the case? And secondly, how do we address it? Who wants to come in first?
I think that, yes, I absolutely accept it and I agree with it. And I think what he's describing so eloquently is that the same process that's actually happened in all of our institutions, be it in education, be it in the civil service, be it in all layers of government, that this diversity, equity and inclusion has managed to push out anybody that doesn't agree with it. So you then get this prevailing view, whilst underneath everything goes to hell in a handcart. So in order to actually reverse that, it's actually, going to be very, very difficult because all of the up-and-coming police officers, anyone that's coming out of education from university, is going to be of that mindset because they have been trained and indoctrinated to be of that mindset. So it's going to take some pretty strong leadership at the very top to say, no, this is how you're...
And one way to do that would be to not prioritise people coming out of universities. And when I say not prioritise, what I mean is to focus on hiring police officers who haven't been to university, who are, you know, maybe they can do some kind of apprenticeship or something. Because the problem is DEI. You know, if people were just being treated fairly, and it's not just the policing, it's also the justice system. If there wasn't this sense that there is almost a kind of optics a necessity for the correct optics to appear to be policing some more lightly than others, then we wouldn't have this, I say, appearance of unfairness. I think it is actual unfairness in the way the police approach different parts of the public as they understand them, because they're the ones who are dividing them up into those communities. It's not necessarily the case that the people that they would define as being part of a certain community would think of themselves in the same way.
This DEI dogma that we talk about, which is, as you said, is in...
Diversity, equity and inclusion.
Yeah, which is in fact, Whitehall, as we'll come to later on, you know, all our institutions. I think that's a massive failure of the Conservative government. I think they have...
Yeah, I agree with that.
You know, they let that happen for 14...
It's also the problem with this country isn't that there are more black people or women in senior positions, and that there's a conscious
no one
effort.
said that.
No, but it is, because this is about having a conscious effort to create spaces where those people can be promoted.
He's got all the straw mans tonight.
The reason that, you know, there was no black women running FTSE 100 companies 40 years ago wasn't because none of them were capable. It was because there were institutional barriers
What if
along
none of them
the
were
way.
capable?
Well, it seems extremely unlikely.
It does.
And
no,
also,
it's just happened in a discrimination case that they
It may
won,
well be the case.
2 white coppers, because an Asian who didn't have the same level of experience and qualification that they had he got the job over them for the fact that they wanted to have an Asian man in the role. They won that case. That's a court of law.
If you were to go through the tribunal cases, you'd find 10 times as many the other way around, right? Of course you would over recent decades. And I think that, you know, if every police officer in this country was a Muslim man, do you think that white people would automatically feel so comfortable? Of course they wouldn't. They'd say, oh, do they understand my community? And we see that in reverse. And I think it's your privilege that shows when you don't understand why these minority communities feel ostracised.
The point isn't that representation on some level is a good thing. You know, whether we go towards quotas and all that and end up killing off meritocratic values is another.
I'm sorry, I think this country has been run by mediocre to rubbish white men for a long time.
Hang on, let Adam
the
answer.
idea that white blokes are all so fantastic, oh, the country doesn't look like it.
We're not talking about their colour or anything like that. It's just, it's a... How do I put this? It's more divisive ultimately because it just reminds you of our differences.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And that's why it's poisonous.
Before we had this change in attitude, these people didn't get a chance.
If the point is that we want to look past race and sexuality and all that, then if we keep talking about it over and over again and only recruit people for those characteristics, which is ultimately the end goal of this DEI, this diversity dogma, as I see it, I think that's a worse outcome.
This is also a problem with the College of Policing as well, because they're an unaccountable quango. They are the ones who invented the category of a non-crime hate incident. So I think that the College of Policing also have a lot to answer for.
I've got one. I've got a non-crime hate incident.
You'll have another one in 45 minutes.
Well, probably. Oh, here we are. Here we are.
You can report whatever you like.
Benjamin, you must think that the likes of the non-crime hate incident are an absolute outrage, that you've got people that work for the police force scouring through the internet and all the rest of it to actually report people for non-crimes.
I mean, look, there are an awful lot of crimes that the police don't investigate.
Yes.
And so I think, given that they don't have the capacity to do that, things that explicitly are not thought to be a crime is a waste of time.
Right, yes.
But I would investigate heavily.
Well, many would. Vicky says, does Benjamin not understand that this is ultimately a white country at the moment and therefore there will, of course, be more white people in jobs? I mean, that's
it's
a fair
also
point.
majority women, and, you know, I'm pretty sure if you asked a lot of women that had careers in the police, certainly a decade or a couple of decades ago, they wouldn't tell you that it would be a great workplace.
Hang on, Scandinavia is one of the most gender equal societies by gender, and when the playing field is open completely, women just happen to choose different jobs to men.
Yes.
So there are other reasons for that.
That's not an argument for making places unwelcome to certain groups.
Who made that argument?
I wish we'd made this show unwelcome to you. Still to come tonight, we've got the Bunch of Five, where we'll discuss North Korea reopening for tourists. We're sending Benjamin there. And how he actually wants to go. And how Labour could reverse the ban on woke civil service jobs. But next, the Saturday Scrap, Benjamin and Dr. Renee will go head-to-head on whether we have too many universities with useless degrees. You're with the Saturday Five, live on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, we're joined this morning by the broadcaster Paula London, who thinks we shouldn't allow flexible working, and the founder of Real Mums Club, Chrissy Powell, who thinks that it is an absolutely brilliant idea. Let's start with you, Chrissy, because nobody is suggesting for a minute, are they, that being a parent isn't a job?
Parenting a job itself, but I think flexible working, where it really comes into play, is it provides a gateway for those parents that currently cannot work. It provides them a gateway into the working world. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think every single employer should look into that as an option.
It's a fantastic idea, Chrissy, unless you're an employer. I would have thought you can't get people through sickness, through holiday, through when they want to work and when they don't want to work. Why even bother thinking about working? Why not just get paid for sitting at home doing nothing?
Because flexibility isn't just about term time only contracts. I myself, as a working mum, having a flexible employer, it means that I can still continue my work duties when children are ill. Recently, my daughter had a huge allergic reaction. It resulted into an A&E trip. If that wasn't a flexible employee, it would mean I'd have to have time off. Whether that's paid or unpaid, it can be detrimental to the employer and the employee. So by allowing me to work from home and offering more flexibility, employers offer different time scales. So it doesn't always mean that you have to work a 9 to 5 anymore. It might mean that you're best suited to work later on in the evening and pick up your work that way. I just think it's fantastic.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. Now, lots of you have been sending in your thoughts on previous guest Kevin Hurley, who said white drunken scum. Now, I didn't actually hear that, but of course, if I had, I would have challenged him on it, as many of you have been writing in to say you would have liked to have done so. So thank you very much for those comments coming in. But now, though, it's time for this. OK, well, tonight's main event, folks, because the Saturday Scrap includes, with A-level results this week, thousands of students are now aware of their grades, enough to, you know, whether or not it can get them into their university of choice or whether they're going to have to go through clearing and all that malarkey. However, many courses are now known as Mickey Mouse degrees. So should we cut university targets for 50% of kids to go to universities, or should we just get rid of these so-called Mickey Mouse degrees altogether? Should we actually scrap some universities, frankly, too? Well, seconds out. It's round one. Benjamin Butterworth, Dr. Renee, take it away.
OK, I'm going to start tonight, Benjamin. I'm afraid you started last time. So firstly, I think the answer to all of those questions is yes, but let me explain why. I think Tony Blair actually wrecked education and our young people in this country when he decided that 50% should be the targets for university. 50% of our kids should go to university. In this sweep of a pen, where he actually got rid of polytechnics and made them into more universities that we didn't need, he convinced our young people that the only legitimate way to be respectable in society was to have a degree. And obviously in doing that, then fees went up, and along the way you came out the other end with a degree of any type that you wanted. I know of people who've done film degrees where they have 6 hours of lessons a week, 6 hours, but they're far too stressed to get a job, of course, as well. Now, the thing about all of this is that what he did at the same time was increase migration into those low-skilled jobs that people would have done. So when they came out of university, even if they couldn't get a graduate job, which many of them can't, neither could they rely on being able to get any kind of job, even if it was a low-skill one, because they'd been taken by migrants, pushing down the wages even further. So nobody could get a job anymore that could actually pay for them to actually live a life, get a house, make some savings. We then convinced nurses and the police that they needed to have degrees. Those jobs were no more respectable if they didn't have a degree. So we now have this whole tranche of people who arguably are not as good as the old vocationally trained nurses, policemen and other things. We actually have laden these kids with massive degrees, and we now don't have plasterers or plumbers or anyone to do those jobs. And yet, ironically, if you can actually get yourself trained as a plasterer or a plumber today, you'll earn 120,000 quid a year. You know, if you want to go into nursing, you'll start on about 28,000 a year, but you will have your student debt, of course. So yes, we need to get rid of the need for these degrees. We need to actually make all jobs at the same level in terms of respectability. As a society, we should be as proud of a waitress as we are of a doctor, and we should actually only have degrees that are necessary to lead to a vocational job. So doctors, lawyers, architects, engineers. We don't need degrees in film or Taylor Swift studies or sport. Let's go back to proper apprenticeships where we fast-track children into what they're good at. Let's recognise their skills and be proud of all of them.
I think this is a wildly outdated and out-of-touch argument, and you make it perfectly by saying that people studying film is a bad thing. Now, one of the few things, frankly, that Britain continues to lead the world in is our cultural sector. No country besides the US competes with Britain's cultural output. We make billions, tens of billions, from our film industry, from our sets, from our music, from our theatre, And that is an area where it's a wise investment to have great university degrees, great training for young people. Now, let me point this out. A lot of what you say, the problems we have, whether it's the effects of migration on the workforce, whether it's stagnant wages or access to assets, those things are broader economic problems. They're not about universities or the level of debt that they give you, isn't about the principle. We have to understand what kind of a country the United Kingdom is and where our opportunities in the world lie. And it isn't, as much as people want to hark back, in manufacturing, in so-called low-skilled jobs. That is not what grows our economy. Look at some of the similar economies like ours: Canada, Finland, Sweden, Japan. They have targets of 50% or higher degrees. South Korea, a very similar country that massively exceeds what you'd expect a nation of that size and position to achieve in its economy, has a target of 75% of young people going to university. And that is because we are a tertiary economy. Our skills are in our education levels. That's where we get the kind of people that can do high-level jobs that attract massive companies, banks, consultancies. You know, the banking sector is 20% of our GDP. We need highly educated people because manufacturing jobs ain't coming back no matter how much you hark.
All right, well, let's take that out to the panel now then. Ding, ding, ding. I wonder, Adam, one of our comments says that actually the universities let the grades slip in 1991 onwards. The reason here is that there are more firsts. The reason there are more firsts today is because actually, you know, what you're getting as a first is actually a 2-2.
Grade inflation.
It's grade inflation. So are we actually just creating a factory farm of young people to put money into the coffers of these vice-chancellors of these universities and actually selling children a very cruel lie?
It's a cruel lie, and we should actually allow these universities to fail on their business acumen, because then they shouldn't come cap in hand to us to say we need more money, we can't cope without Chinese students anymore. Because I can tell you, I know many of those film students, and they didn't go on to have glittering careers.
Sorry, can I just point out, when people talk about foreign students, you know, they pay an enormous amount of money compared to domestic students, so they're paying our bills.
I never took Benjamin to be so much of a capitalist, did you?
Can I point out, just ask yourself, why is the brightest and the best and the richest from around the world queuing up to go to our universities? We would be idiots to stop our own kids getting those opportunities. Why do you think rich Chinese kids want to go to Oxbridge or LSE or any of those?
Nobody's saying to these kids, you can't have that opportunity, but what we're saying is we should actually make the playing field even. No.
Because you're saying we should cut the number of places.
We should absolutely cut the number of places.
So you're saying that poor people's kids shouldn't get those chances.
Adam, come in. The point is, students in STEM, more the merrier, please, because they're valuable skills and they will go into high-paying work. Doctors, for example, law, those vocational skills, great. 6 hours a week in learning film, watching Citizen Kane or whatever, you know, they don't go on to become Christopher Nolan, do they? They're not adding value. You've talked about the culture sector. How many of those people in the culture sector actually studied?
Is massively growing in this country.
Yeah, and how many of those people studied film?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, a fifth of people in London work in something related to that now.
How many?
Not thanks to getting a film degree.
How many of them studied film?
University of Finger Painting or whatever else. Emma Webb.
Well, you've mentioned film, but there are all sorts of things like gender studies or whatever, and it creates an economy of its own. It creates jobs like, you know, all these DI managers who get paid a hell of a lot more working in the NHS than the doctors and than the nurses do. So I agree with everything that Renee has said. I take what you're saying about the fact that we have become a tertiary economy, but the reality is, and it's quite strange hearing this coming from you because you're a socialist.
I'm not a socialist. I've never been a socialist.
Really?
I'm a social democrat. I believe you have to grow the pie, but people also should get a piece of the pie guaranteed.
Anyway. We need to stop looking down our nose at people who do.
Exactly.
No, I'm sorry, I don't. Of course, you shouldn't look down their nose.
And it's
why is it that 80% of kids in Kensington and Chelsea, this country's richest borough, go to university, but only 20% in Bolton? When people talk about having fewer university places, it's not the rich kids, it's not the pushy middle class parents.
Well, it would have helped if Labour hadn't shut down so many grammar schools.
Yes.
And it changes people's lives.
All right. You could bring back grants for those working class kids, and then they could go to.
Okay.
But that's a social mobility.
No, we're going to a break, Benjamin, unless you're going to pay for
a council estate kid like me going to LSE changed my life, and I think other people should have that opportunity.
So a council estate kid like me didn't go to university initially,
we'll leave
and
that
I did really well.
Right, still ahead. We answer all of your questions in Ask the Five. No topics are off limits. I wonder what you've got in store for us this week. You're with the Saturday Five, live on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Over the next 24 hours, high pressure largely holding on across the UK, keeping it fairly dry and settled. A few showers still in the flow, and we can see that on the bigger picture. Generally low pressure to the north, high pressure extending in from the southwest, keeping most weather systems at bay for the rest of the weekend. Through this evening and overnight, largely dry across much of the country. A few showers still possible across parts of Scotland, northern England, down into Wales and the West Country. But most places dry as we head through the night, and towns and cities generally holding up in double figures, but in the countryside dipping down to around 7 or 8 degrees. So a bit of a fresh start to Sunday, but there'll be plenty of sunny spells. Showers, though, possible in a few places, most prevalent across central and northern parts of Scotland. Temperatures here first thing Sunday morning around 10 to 12 Celsius, so on the fresh side, best of the sunshine towards Aberdeenshire. Northern Ireland, Northern England also a few showers possible, largely in the west, the east generally dry, and 1 or 2 showers for Wales and the West Country. Parts of the Midlands over into East Anglia, South East England, plenty of sunshine to start Sunday. Through the day, well, that high pressure generally keeps things dry and settled for many parts. More in the way of sunny spells for parts of Wales, western parts of England, Northern Ireland, that we saw quite a cloudy picture on Saturday. A few showers still possible across Scotland, but they do start to ease later in the day. Breezy here, temperatures on the cool side, 15, 16 Celsius. In the sunshine, rising into the low 20s, highs around 25 Celsius for London. Then it's all changed slowly through Monday as a weather system moves in from the Atlantic. Outbreaks of rain pushing in across Northern Ireland. The winds picking up through the Irish Sea as well. Gales developing later on in the day. Best of the sunshine holding on across the southeast. Temperatures here around 25 or 26 Celsius and staying unsettled right through much of the week. See you soon.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have saved Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. As always, thank you very much for your emails about tonight's topics. We're going to get to some more of those in Ask the Five. Now, though, it's time for this. Right, newbie cherries up first. What have you got for us, Adam?
So this is something of a theme for today's topics, isn't it? Reports of a ban on civil service diversity jobs being reversed by the Labour government. Now, this is something that's there's a perennial problem. Diversity and inclusion jobs across Whitehall. The last Conservative government tried to stop them. I wrote about it frequently at my old job. They said they were going to end it. They never did. And now Labour have come in and said, you know what, we're not even going to try. And I think it's a complete waste of money.
Mm. Yeah, and that sort of takes us into that debate earlier about diversity, equity and inclusion, doesn't it? And this stuff is pervasive. It's absolutely everywhere. It's infected the whole country. And it's why people like you get on this panel.
Yeah, I'm the diversity hire.
Renee, what have you got?
So this week, Chris Packham once again demonstrated that the cult of climate is reaching its frenzy. And I won't tell you what he said. We'll just play it. We have a clip of what he said.
But if anyone here is banking with Barclays, then I suggest you stick your head in a bucket of fuel and set fire to it. Because you're burning our planet down, and it's time to put this stuff behind us.
And people clap. I mean, can you imagine if he'd have said, if anyone here is Jewish, please put your head in a bucket of petrol and set fire to it? Can you imagine? Apparently the police have investigated that and there is nothing to pursue.
Two-tier policing, isn't
Yeah,
it?
honestly, you would think that must be some form of incitement, isn't it? Benjamin, would you bang him up, so to speak?
Now.
I'm not in the CPS. I mean, look, anything that's offensive or inciting hatred should obviously be investigated.
No, you were about to say anybody who says anything that's offensive needs to be put in prison.
Will you be unbanking Barclays?
Or putting your head in a bucket.
Oh, put it in your head.
Don't get your hopes up. Unfortunately, I need the money, so I do intend to be back next Saturday.
Right, now it's time for mine. Shockingly, this season of Strictly Come Dancing is to be the most expensive yet. And I say, look, yet again, once again, it's wrong'uns at the Beeb are actually requiring more of our money, more of the tax, well, the licence fee payers' cash that we're all forced to fund with threat of prison.
Is it so they can have a childminder?
It's so that they can have basically everyone chaperoned to ensure that there's no wrongdoing that goes on and all these other things. I mean, honestly.
I mean, look, we've had some really worrying stories of former contestants, the celebrity contestants, saying that they've been hit, they've been verbally abused, and they're investigating that. Those investigations cost a fortune for a start, and now they all have to have a minder in the studio the whole time when they're learning the dances, and they spend like 6 hours a day doing this. I think they're doing the right thing, because in theatre in the West End, it's normal that somebody would be watching all the rehearsals, that they wouldn't be left to their lonesome.
Yeah.
And, it's the biggest show on television, so what's wrong with spending money on it?
Yeah, well, I just sort of think if they want to do it, try and compete in the private sector. That might be an idea. Emma Webb, what have you got for us?
Well, a pensioner called Daphne Austin, who's in her 70s, died of sepsis, and the inquest found, and the coroner ruled that this was a result of neglect. She was dehydrated, her glucose was uncontrolled, and the coroner ruled that this was due to a delay in blood testing that was partly due to the junior doctors walking out. And we keep hearing over and over again that these doctors striking, GPs striking, isn't going to have any impact on patients. Of course, I'm sure very few of us actually believe that that will be the case, that it doesn't have an impact. Otherwise, what's the point in striking? They're saying that they're so overburdened that they don't have enough staff to go around. So I don't know how you can have sufficient cover to make sure that your patients are taken care of properly. And so this lady had a delay in her blood testing. She died as a result of sepsis, which is quite an unpleasant way to go, to put it lightly. And I just think that this is unbelievably appalling, and I think it shows the irresponsibility of those who are choosing to walk out.
Yeah, it does, and it calls into question, actually, the ethics and morality of strike action. Benjamin, what have you got?
Well, I'm thinking of going on holiday, Darren, and there is somewhere special that's just opened up, opens in December, in fact. I think we should all go there, and it's North Korea. So it's been closed since the start of 2020 to travellers, unless you're Russian or Chinese, because it was still under COVID measures, despite saying that it never had a problem with COVID. Oh, there's the lefty people. And would you go to North Korea?
No.
No.
I think I might, actually.
One of our viewers, Cassandra, says Benjamin is too left-wing and woke, even for North Korea.
Can you do the little march, Benjamin? I think you'd fit in nicely in North Korea.
I was in the Scout band as a kid, so I did the marching.
Oh, they'll love you. They'll love you.
Fit.
You'll be made an honourary colonel of the North Korean...
your favourite party leader is Kim Jong-Starmer, isn't
he? I think that's wrong. But look, you can go to the mountainous region of North Korea from December this year. I love my sort of unpredictable offbeat travel. I went to Iraq recently. I went to Yemen. I'm definitely on a list at the Foreign Office, and I think it's pretty interesting.
Well, Benjamin, I'm delighted to let you know that actually there has been a crowdfunding appeal at gbnews.com/your say, and all of our viewers are delighted by the idea and willing to fund it. Still ahead, though, we answer all of your questions in Ask the Five. No topics off limits. I wonder what you've got in store for us this week. You're with the Saturday Five, live on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
Well, I'm joined now by royal biographer and former royal photographer, Ian Lloyd. Ian,
hello, Jacob.
Thank you
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me. This is going to be great, isn't it? The opportunity to go around and see where the King comes onto the balcony from. Really interesting insight to how Buckingham Palace works.
It's exciting. I went yesterday, there was a press preview, and the thing that struck me first of all is that if you're the King and or the late Queen and you're on the balcony, you can't see the Mall. I mean, we all see people coming down from the top, you know, thousands of people crowding in towards Buckingham Palace. They can't see it because of this great monument to Queen Victoria called the Queen Victoria Memorial, or they call it the wedding cake, but it blocks the view. So apparently the King has a TV in there, and the late Queen did as well. So what they do is they when they're waiting to come on, they're watching the TV to see how the crowd's getting nearer the palace. And the other thing that struck me is when we were on it looking down, is you can actually see individual faces in the crowd out there, because we looked out, you know. So they do get a good view of what's happening directly underneath the palace, you know.
So they can see individuals. So if there's a friendly face in the crowd, they can see that person and possibly even wave. But they can't see that enormous mass of people you get at the big events that goes back towards Admiralty Arch.
The other thing I learned is there's a great historical link, because the person that put the east wing on the palace, because it was originally 3 sides, and Queen Victoria had, of course, 9 children, so they had to build a 4th side for all the nurseries and things. Edward Blord was the architect, but the master builder was Thomas Cubitt.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Thank you very much for all of your emails and messages about tonight's topics. Speaking of, though, it's time for this. Yes, indeedy, it's time for Ask the Five. Let's see what you've got for us this week. Now, panel, if every immigrant to the UK went on strike, how many days do you think it would take for the country to grind to a halt? That's from Andy. Thank you for that, Andy. Well, Benjamin, I assume you think quite a lot.
Quite a lot of what? I mean, it wouldn't take any time for the country to grind to a halt, because immigrants, the children of immigrants, have built this country, and they have done for many, many decades.
And yet our GDP per capita has not risen in 15 years.
What, since the 1950s?
In 15 years. So recent immigration has done nothing for our GDP per capita.
Yeah, and it's record highs.
Imagine how bad it would be if we didn't have talented people coming over here.
And how dare you say that? All of the ancestors of everyone on this panel who has worked their blood, sweat and tears to build this country. Very likely to be British. I thank you very much. They are. All of our ancestors can be tracked back.
Well, I'm the grandkids of Canadian immigrants. And, I think the vast majority of people in this country doesn't take long to find that they're from a different
Not me, but Benjamin's answer reminds me of, I can't remember who it was, who tweeted out a list that people found very funny. It was supposed to be a sort of argument for how indispensable migrants are. And she did the classic of saying the guy who, does the cleaning, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, of course, if, as Benjamin was saying earlier, we're a tertiary economy, but somebody does have to do those jobs. And it always seems to be the argument of the left that it should be immigrants who do those jobs.
Indeed, right. Thank you, Andy. Now, next one. Can we declare the UK riots officially over now? It appears the tough sentences have worked, and that's from Mary. I mean, is it true? Do you think the iron fist of the law and Sir Keir Starmer showing his muscles have worked, Renee?
I do think that people are now thinking twice about going out and being, you know, mindlessly violent. So, yes, I think the riots...
But I also think, Renee, in the same token, everyone's scared of what they're saying online, that Starmer's going to send the cops to arrest people.
I was just going to say, but what this will achieve, actually, is it will silence people in just non-violent ways and send everything underground, and when you send things underground, it gets worse.
Didn't they say if you're just a casual...
In a few months, won't it? That's what I imagine.
It'll blow up again in a few months.
In a few months. Not necessarily widespread riots, but I think if we're not addressing the root causes of this, every now and then this will... Like France said, in France, it'll be the same sort of thing here.
Yeah, like the Gilets jaunes and all the rest of it coming.
Well, my favourite tweet was when they said, isn't it good of Britain to host France's annual riots while they have the Olympics?
All right, next question. What else traditional have you zoned out of, Benji? We know about elderly people, now the church and religion. That's from Dawn.
I like Dawn.
Well, I've never been religious. You know, I don't care about Harry Potter. I don't care about Christianity. They're all sort of made-up books. You're happy to read them, but they are nonsense. But I did go to a Church of England primary school.
Didn't do you bad?
And actually, I'll let you into a secret. If you walked into my flat, you would definitely think a sort of elderly Tory MP lived there, because everything... I've got a Union Jack flag in my bedroom. Everything is wooden. I've got a grandfather clock, a piano. I do live quite traditionally.
All right.
He's not zoned out of the grandfather clocks, not just yet.
No.
Well, I don't like to assume it's gender, but I believe...
All capitalism in the...
His grandmother clock.
Right, next question. Which of the following would you like to go to dinner with and why? Donald Trump, Angela Rayner and Eddie Izzard, Elon Musk, Billy Connolly and Kamala Harris, or Keir Starmer, J.K. Rowling and Ricky Gervais? I think number 3 for me, because I would love to see Ricky Gervais take on Keir Starmer and, of course, J.K. Rowling as well.
And actually, J.K. and Ricky would dull the pain of Keir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whereas if you go for number 1, I think
you'd
be ganged up
No,
on.
I'd go number 1.
Number 1?
No, I would go number 2, because I want to be at dinner with the next US President, Kamala Harris.
Oh, gosh.
Harris. Right, very quickly, Emma, you've got a comment for us.
I do. So this has been sent to me by a friend of mine whose husband, I believe, is a train driver. And she said the training for a train driver is intense. You have to have so much knowledge in your head at all times and concentrate constantly all day. Pay rise is definitely justified. And the fact that they've not had a proper pay rise in more than 4 years. So thought I'd read it out because it's contrary to. I'm saying that they shouldn't have a pay rise.
Justifies them earning more than doctors, because you don't have to know much to be a doctor.
And without any productivity requests either.
Yeah.
Just, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see you say the economy would collapse without my...
But it's a good. It's a good argument. It's a good argument against those who say it's an easy job.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much to our guests tonight. Next up, my friends. Adam popped his cherry very well, I thought. Next up, it's the brilliant Leo Curse with the Saturday Night Showdown. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Over the next 24 hours, high pressure largely holding on across the UK, keeping it fairly dry and settled. A few showers still in the flow, and we can see that on the bigger picture. Generally low pressure to the north, high pressure extending in from the southwest, keeping most weather systems at bay for the rest of the weekend. Through this evening and overnight, largely dry across much of the country. A few showers still possible across parts of Scotland, northern England, down into Wales and the West Country. But most places dry as we head through the night. And towns and cities generally holding up in double figures. But in the countryside, dipping down to around 7 or 8 degrees. So a bit of a fresh start to Sunday. But there'll be plenty of sunny spells. Showers, though, possible in a few places. Most prevalent across central and northern parts of Scotland. Temperatures here first thing Sunday morning around 10 to 12 Celsius, so on the fresh side, best of the sunshine towards Aberdeenshire. Northern Ireland, Northern England also a few showers possible, largely in the west. The east generally dry, and 1 or 2 showers for Wales and the West Country. Parts of the Midlands over into East Anglia, South East England, plenty of sunshine to start Sunday. Through the day, well, that high pressure generally keeps things dry and settled for many parts. More in the way of sunny spells for parts of Wales, western parts of England, Northern Ireland that saw quite a cloudy picture on Saturday. A few showers still possible across Scotland, but they do start to ease later in the day. Breezy here, temperatures on the cool side, 15, 16 Celsius. In the sunshine, rising into the low 20s, highs around 25 Celsius for London. Then it's all changed slowly through Monday as a weather system moves in from the Atlantic. Outbreaks of rain pushing in across Northern Ireland. The winds picking up through the Irish Sea as well. Gales developing later on in the day. Best of the sunshine holding on across the southeast. Temperatures here around 25 or 26 Celsius and staying unsettled right through much of the week. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
In tears for Keir, we've seen two-tier policing and two-tier media coverage, with people being sent to jail for posting on Facebook or joining in with naughty chants. Is there now two-tier sentencing? Plus,
notice your placard saying refugees welcome here. Yes. I'm just wondering if you'd like to go down on a list saying you're willing to take the refugees into your home.
Of course not. Only problem is I rent.
lefty protesters demand that Britain open its borders to unvetted, undocumented men from other cultures, but are they willing to open their front doors to the same men? Someone went and asked them, and their answers will not surprise you one bit. And Labour Foreign Secretary David Lammy says that Britain has always been a multicultural place, and the far right are the people who need to integrate. Is he right, or were our ancestors actually a bunch of bigots who'd make today's far-right thugs look like a Green Party convention? This is your Saturday Night Showdown. Discussing all these topics and more with me tonight are an absolutely cracking pair. We have dating coach and entrepreneur Kezia Noble and the comedian and famous international playboy Bruce Devlin. Look at him there in his shorts. Fantastic stuff. But first, let's get your latest news headlines from Sophia Wensler.
Leo, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 8 o'clock. A fire at Somerset House in central London has been contained after around 125 firefighters were called to tackle the blaze. Priceless artworks, including a Van Gogh painting, have not been damaged, and all the public are safe after the fire ripped through the roof of the historic building. Somerset House will remain closed until further